of lunches that we've had around the country, we make a commitment to the judges and the lawyers and the jurors that attend that we will finish it promptly at 1:30. On behalf of, I'm Steve Sussman, the Executive Director of the Civil Jury Project, and on behalf of all of the sponsoring organizations and the host firms whose names you see up on the screen, I welcome you to Seattle's second Jury Improvement Lunch. The Civil Jury Project was established at NYU Law School a few years ago as the only academic center in the country devoted exclusively to studying why the jury trial was so important to our founding fathers that it is mentioned in the Declaration of Independence, Article 3 of the Constitution, and 3 of the Bill of Rights, and additionally was protected in civil trials. The constitutions of every state that joined the Union protected the right to a jury trial, and today, with a few exceptions, the state constitutions protect that right. The jury is so much a part of the DNA of this country's justice system that there is not a courtroom in the country that doesn't have a jury box. Yet, the slide I'm showing you on the screen now shows rather dramatically that those jury boxes today are unused. It shows that since 1962, the number of jury trials conducted per average authorized federal judgeship across the country has dropped from 10 to 2 in 2017. Please note that the number of bench trials has declined even more dramatically. The decline of all civil jury trials is pretty good proof that all civil trials, bench and jury trials, is pretty good proof that the disappearance of jury trials is not due to some unique characteristic of jury trials, either their expense or their length, or the fear of runaway jury verdicts, or specialized jury advocacy experience. Last year, the average federal judge in the Western District of Washington tried 3.9 jury cases and 1.9 bench trials. That sounds low, but actually, this district ranks 9th and 6th in the nation, respectively, for the number of jury and bench trials per judge. One might explain the decline in the number of trials by suggesting that the number of cases being filed has dropped. But in fact, this slide shows that, and this is a slide that shows a percentage of civil terminations by bench and jury trials. And it shows that there has been a dramatic decrease in the percent, now under about 0.5% of cases that are filed are disposed of by jury trials. Same pattern again for bench and jury trials. And this, if you look at the percentage of dispositions, it accounts for the fact that the number of filed cases may have gone up or down over time. When it comes to state courts in King County, the decline is obvious, but since 1992, if you look at the jury trial line, the red line, that is the straightest line I have seen around the country. So my takeaway from these statistics is that the state judges here in particular must be doing something different to prevent the dramatic drop in jury trials we see around the country elsewhere. And the federal judges are doing a pretty good job too, because they rank so high in terms of the number of trials per judge with other districts in the country. So it's worth studying what magic sauce these judges are using in Seattle to halt the decline. Our project is studying why all jury trials are disappearing, particularly jury trials. we're asking the question, should we be concerned about it? And if so, what can be done to reverse the pattern? Let me mention briefly a few things that we've done in the last 3 years before we get our panel up here. We have created and maintained 2 websites. The first one is designed for lawyers and judges. We have 250 state and federal judges around the country who are judicial advisors, 60 professors at law schools who are academic advisors, and 35 jury consultant advisors. We have dozens of projects going on. They are described in our website. They include engaging in empirical research on a number of subjects. We have surveyed non-lawyers. Those surveys demonstrate that most people in this country do not understand, 80% of the people in this country think that the number of trials has increased in the last decade. They just don't have the facts right. And I think one of the dangers of keeping jury trials vibrant and alive in this country is to inform the public that, in fact, the courthouses in this country are underused and dark much of the time. When we tell people that the right to trial by jury is guaranteed by the Constitution, then they are very concerned about the disappearance of trials. We have studied material contracts that businesses make with each other, not consumer contracts, but all material contracts of publicly held companies have to be filed with the SEC. So we looked at about 5,000 of them in the first 6 months of last year to see how many of those contracts contain jury waiver clauses or arbitration clauses. And to our surprise, 57% do not contain either, meaning that approximately a majority of the companies in this country still in disputes between each other would rather have a jury resolve that dispute than go to arbitration or a bench trial. We have interviewed the general counsel of companies who have not used arbitration or jury waiver clauses, and we find out that there's a growing dissatisfaction with arbitration. It is just as expensive. It is just as time-consuming. There is no right of appeal. Everything is done in private. And so that companies are not happy with the idea of paying $750 an hour to 3 former judges to sit in a conference room and decide their cases. We have proposed a whole number of innovations to make jury trials better, and we have gone around 2 trials to test whether these innovations actually improve jury comprehension. We put on programs around the country for judges and lawyers, and communicating in lunches like this and social media with former jurors to learn from them about their experience, what they liked and didn't like. We have now hosted 3 full-day workshops in New York City for state and federal judges. We have 2 scheduled for the fall. And so that when we get through with these 5, we will have finished with 150 judges around the country attending these workshops. This is our 17th jury improvement lunch, and we have more planned for the fall in Boise, Miami, Oklahoma City, Los Angeles, Tucson, and Las Vegas. We publish a monthly newsletter. Having come to this lunch, you will get it in the future. If you came to the last one here, you are getting it now. We maintain a second website. This is for people who are summoned to jury duty or have recently served on jury duty and been discharged. And when they come to this website, and they get there, by the way, if you've served on a jury, the judges around the country are handing discharged jurors these cards. If the judges here don't have them, they can pick them up at the desk when they go out. It occurred to us that if you stay at any hotel in the country or go to any restaurant, you're given a survey, satisfaction survey. I mean, whatever service, I got one the other day when I left a dentist office. Did you like, how did we do? I don't know whether they're advertising somewhere. But the judicial system in this country, the justice system, should be asking the same kind of questions of citizens who give of their time for hardly any pay about their jury duty. Did they like it? Could it be improved? What can be improved? And so the purpose of this was to get jurors to come to this website, and they do. We've had hundreds of jurors come to this website and fill out a questionnaire about their experience. And so that's, if you served on jury duty before and you go to this icon on the right, you will get greeted by a questionnaire. If you have received a summons but haven't served on a jury duty, you will get to the icon on the left, and we find thousands of people surfing the web to figure out how to get out of jury duty. And the point is, we use social media to reach those people. We're active presence on Twitter and social media and we send them to this website, and they're looking for how to get out. And when they click on this icon, they immediately see some of the satisfied jurors and some judges say, "Stop, don't throw away your summons. You're about to have the best experience in your life." And we have video testimonials that we have gotten from the people who have served on jury duty before and have clicked on the website. We send videographers to interview them. And again, we're trying to improve the yield of jury summons. And I think we are making an impact around the country with that. As I say, we get to those people by this social media, Twitter and Facebook. We have a site that's called Jury Matters. So our hope is that this will, if we talk about the subject, we will keep jury trials alive. You should have at your table, lawyers and judges, a one-page list of the reasons we have been able to identify over the last 3 years why jury trials are declining and disappearing. And we have divided them into two categories. The first is ones that lawyers, judges, and Civil Jury Project can't do something about because it requires congressional action or legislative action or something like that. And then the second category are reasons that we do have some control over, we think. We would appreciate, we're not going to discuss this today. The purpose today is to get the information from the judges and jurors about recent trials. But we would appreciate those of you who are in attendance taking this paper home, looking at it. If you've got other ideas or think we're wrong on some ideas or think you have an idea how we can fix things, please email us. Everyone, we get different ideas every time we have one of these luncheons. There are clearly alternative ways of resolving disputes, the most prominent being confidential arbitration using private judges. But there is no alternative way of exposing ordinary citizens to how the legal system works or empowering them to play an important role as decision makers in the legal system. Now we're going to have a panel discussion, and I would like to ask some of the jurors that we have. We have 6 jurors with us today. I will introduce them. If you will come forward now and take a seat at the head table, and we're going to mix up the jurors, and we have 3 judges with us. And so Angela Lamb, please come forward, and Sharice Dyer, Jean Chowning, Linda Hosea, Claire Burke, and Shang Shen. And these are the jurors. And first I want to thank you all for your service and thank you for your willingness to come here today and share with us your experiences. And I would like to introduce our judges that we have here. Judge Teresa Frick, who is a magistrate judge. There she is. Would you come to the head table too? You have a place too. Judge Robert Lasnik, Federal District Trial Judge, and Superior Court Judge Sandra Widland.
It's Fricky, by the way.
Fricky. Widlin?
Yeah.
Did I get that right? Good. Okay, great. So, let me first talk to our jurors. And I'm going to have to kind of come out here because I can't see your names unless I do. And my eyes aren't so good these days. So, jurors, I'd like to go down. All of you have been recently on all of you have been on state court juries, as I understand. No one's been on a federal court jury, which is pretty. That we get state court jurors, not federal court jurors, is obvious from the statistics. Most of the jury trials in this country are taking place in state court, not federal courts. We have both civil and criminal jurors here, although we are specializing in civil jurors. Alas, we can't get enough civil jurors to make a full panel. So we've gotten both here, and there are many, many common issues about jury experience for both civil and criminal. Some of you actually deliberated. Some of you did not deliberate. And so there's a variety of experience. One thing I noticed about all of you, I think, Ms. Chen, you were an alternate juror you were probably the longest trial. How long did your trial last?
2 weeks.
2 weeks. That's the longest trial we have here.
No.
So,
Yeah, we were 3.
Oh, 3 weeks. Okay. Then they're the two longest. Some of you were in trials that are 1 or 2 days. So I'd like to begin with Ms. Burke, and we'll go down the line. Why don't you tell us what you liked best and what you like least about your jury service?
With the microphone?
Yeah, you grab the mic and you'll have to share the mic and then pass it in.
Well, I think probably my favorite thing was just the peek that it allowed me into how the system actually works, as opposed to what you might see on TV, which I don't watch a lot of TV, but there's still the strong impression.
What were the differences?
Well, I don't watch enough TV to draw that out, but I think that the major difference is that obviously TV is much more dramatized, and the court case that I served on was a very small matter that ended with the defendant having a felony on his record. So the hardest part was that at the time that I was serving, I was in graduate school and working full time. So it was a real hit on my month to be serving, even though my trial was only 4 or 5 days. And I think my least favorite part, that part aside, I was honored to serve and to be a participant in the system. But the hardest thing, I think, was that it felt like a very cruel system where it doesn't, the law doesn't allow for considering people's situations in life. So this person was in a very hard spot. He was doing something that wasn't hurting anyone, and it ended with a felony on his record, and that felt really harsh.
It's for your interest. When jury trials were first written into our constitutional documents, jurors decided the law as well as the facts. They had the total power. And in fact, the reason our founding fathers wanted juries there was to soften the impact of the harsh impact of the law. And so jurors were free to do things that they thought was the right thing. Over time, that's changed. So now the judge tells you, I give you the law, you decide the facts, but you got to take the law from me. And if you can't follow what I'm saying, you shouldn't be serving as a juror. So this is a change. We've changed to a system that's over time, little by little, where jurors have been less empowered to do what they consider to be the right thing, although most trial lawyers think they do it anyway. They figure out how to do it. Ms. Chen, what did you like most and least about your service?
I'm an immigrant, so I was very excited to have the opportunity when I was selected. So we watch on TV, on movies about how the system works, but I was very excited to really participate and witness the whole process from the beginning to almost the end. So I guess for me, it's really the experience to each day and each process. You see the people, the evidence, all kinds of things around.
Were you allowed as an alternate? You did not deliberate?
No, I did not.
Did you know you were going to be excused before?
No, I did.
Were you surprised?
Very much.
Were you disappointed?
Very much. Very much.
Did you hear what the real jury did?
I was emailed by the court that the conclusion.
I mean,
I think was maybe after like an hour.
you found out what the result was?
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Chow, what about your experience did you not like, other than not being able to participate?
I am having an hourly wage job, so the time I spent over there more than 2 weeks, I was not getting paid. So it's not like I cannot pay mortgage or rent, but it's just a financial cost on me.
Okay. Ms. Chowning.
Like the previous jurors, I can just echo that the insight into the process is fascinating, and the opportunity to be a part of something that's so important for our own democracy, I think, is a great feeling. So just watching the strategy of how lawyers decide, who's going to be on, who they'd like to be on the jury, or how they present an argument, or how the judge kind of lays out what this is all about. Those pieces are super interesting to me.
Ms. Dyer, how about you? What did you like most and what did you dislike?
I really enjoyed the process of, like Ginny was saying, watching the law in action. I'd never served on a jury before, so it was very interesting. I enjoyed meeting all of the people on the jury, and through the 3 weeks that we were deliberating and not deliberating, but the 3 weeks that we were in this process, getting to know them, and we're discussing our families and their jobs and all of life's goings on because we couldn't discuss the trial. And then for us, the worst part to me was not being able to deliberate, not being able to have that discussion.
You didn't deliberate?
No.
What happened? The case settled?
Yes.
Your case settled?
Yes, we were on the same trial.
Yeah, so after 3 weeks, we just, one day it was just like, it's over.
It was over?
Yeah, and it was just, we were just about to go into deliberation, actually.
So I usually give the warning to all the jurors that come that we don't want you to talk about the particular case because some of these cases are still going on. There's an appeal and the judges are sensitive about opening the secrecy of the jury deliberations. But since your case is over and has been settled, we can talk candidly, so to speak. So let me ask you this. Did you think that the quality of lawyers made a difference in your case? I mean, were the lawyers equally matched or not equally matched?
I thought that they were quite different in their approach.
Very different.
The attorney for the plaintiff was very precise and thorough, and the attorney for the defense seemed less well organized. So, though he'd obviously met many of the witnesses and knew them and had gone through this process before with them, it seemed like he didn't always have all of his ducks in a row when he got up to the.
After the case, did you two discuss how you would have voted?
I didn't go with the rest of the group,
It dissolved pretty quickly too. I mean, we didn't have a chance to kind of sit down and all say, but right, we were kind of in informal conversation on the way out.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the lawyers were also very interested in asking us, which witnesses were good, how did we do,
Oh,
so there was a little bit of debrief kind of informally, so
you talked to the lawyers afterwards.
We did. Yeah.
And so, Mr. Dwyer, you said that you were unable, and the judges typically give this instruction that you're not supposed to talk to each other about the case until you go into deliberations, when everyone's present, till you've heard all the evidence at the end. Some people have suggested that that's very artificial, that in fact the way people learn, if you go to class at college or high school or wherever you go, that you learn by talking to your fellow students. You go out of the classroom and you talk about the professor's lecture and did you hear this? Did you hear that? So some have suggested that we're doing it in the wrong way. We should allow jurors to talk to each other about the case as long as they are all together in the room when the talking goes on, and as long as they don't decide then. They keep an open mind, because they're not, you're not supposed to decide till you hear the whole case. There are some states that actually allow that. Arizona, for one. And that innovation has been suggested and tried places. There are a lot of judges that don't think they like that. A lot of lawyers don't think they like the idea of jurors being able to talk to each other about the case. Would you have found that helpful, Mr. Chowney and Ms. Dwyer, to have been able to talk about a particular witness? You just hear a witness on the stand. You go back in the jury room with everyone else, you say, I didn't believe a word that person said. Or can you figure out why they called her as a witness? Or, the kind of things that people talk about.
Yeah. So honestly, sometimes they're nonverbal cues, right? But personally, I think I might have liked that, because it's a long case, and to kind of process what's going on as it's kind of happening. Personally, for my own learning style, I think I would have liked to have a chance to process it with others.
Mr. Dwyer?
I agree. If in the group of personalities that we had on our jury, it would have been great to hear all the opinions. But I can see where in some juries where the personalities weren't as congenial as ours, that it would have been difficult and overwhelming to have what often turns out to be one voice.
Let me go to the next juror, Ms. Hosea.
My experiences.
When you get the mic, grab one of those mics here, great. And put it real up close to your face, because everyone wants to hear you.
My experience was substantially different from any of the rest, and also very much further in the past. It was a short trial. We did deliberate. It was in Snohomish County, and from what I recall at that time, there was very little direction that was given to the jury. And the jury started without a process, and that was one of the issues I had with what was going on at the time, that we had to kind of stop and then go back and get a process and then go forward. I think the main issues I observed with it was that both parties were not taking it as seriously. The defendant had a very aggressive attorney, and the prosecutor, or whoever he was, I think didn't feel he had any case to prove, and did not take it very seriously. And in the end, that burden of beyond a reasonable doubt, and the way the defendant was not necessarily an agreeable person. We weren't sure we liked him. We knew we liked the state patrolman who was the one giving all of the evidence that was there. And the attorney took the poor state patrolman apart. We felt sorry for him. I felt sorry for him. So, but I think,
That was a criminal case?
yeah,
And you acquitted the defendant?
and we did,
It was a DWI case?
yes. And it was the way it was presented, and then the way the cross-examination took place. And it was quite an interesting learning experience. And the jury process of that reasonable doubt and the social burden of that was a way interesting learning experience for me. It's one that has remained very, very firmly in my mind since.
Ms. Lamb, pull the mic over. Thank you.
All right. First of all, I was very honored when I received the summons, and I really felt what a great honor, to serve for our country. But then when I went, it was very, it was a lot of hurry up and wait for the selection, which was was frustrating. We heard so was selected, and we heard the case, and it was pretty cut and dry. That part was pretty easy, but then when we got into deliberation, it got frustrating because the law was the way the law was laid out, and then the evidence. It was, I guess, hard to decipher which, where, like you were saying, to have that kind of to do the right thing, but then also do what the law says kind of situation. And that's where that was frustrating, getting hung up on that part. And there was one person that was really not wanting to sway against the law. That was frustrating.
Did you return a verdict in your case?
Yes, we did. Yeah, and it was really obvious that the person was, should be awarded the money that they were.
That was a civil case.
Yes, it was a civil case, and yeah, it was frustrating once we got into the facts and the law and doing the right thing.
Okay.
Okay.
Let me ask this question. A couple of questions about your some of you refer to instructions. Did any of the judges give you instructions about the law at the beginning of the case rather than at the end of the case? One of the things that has been suggested as an innovation is that the judges in this country should instruct jurors at the beginning what to look for, what they're going to be asked, give them a copy of the questions that they're going to be asked to answer at the end, give them a written instructions so each one has a copy.
I think that would be helpful.
What's the rest of your ideas on that?
I would agree.
Ms. Chowning?
No, it sounds like a yeah.
That might be helpful.
I think for the case that I was trying, I would have felt a lot less guilty if I'd known what the law that we were trying this person against was, because that would have felt less like ruining someone's life if I'd known what the law was the entire time.
Okay. Did any of you, were all of you allowed to take notes? Everyone was allowed to take notes. When the judge instructed you at the end, did he or she give you instructions in writing as well as orally? You all got written instructions? Do you get one copy or multiple copies? One copy.
Yeah, no.
Is there some shortage of paper in this country that we can't give everyone a copy of what they are supposed to apply? Why are judges Judge Lasnik, do you give them each a copy of the instructions?
Yes, I do. And I say at the end that they can keep that copy as kind of a door prize for being there. And they can write on the copies, but only the presiding juror should fill out the verdict form and sign it.
But do they each have a verdict form?
They each have a full copy of the instructions, including the verdict form, during closing arguments, that so they can write on the verdict, on the instructions, to take notes at that point. Because I don't like putting the notes in the notebook, because I like the notebook just for testimony and evidence. I don't want them to confuse something the lawyers say in closing argument being in the same place where they're writing notes from the trial. So, yeah. So I give them that, right?
Judge Whalen, how about you?
So all of the jurors get a copy of the written jury instructions, and then there's one verdict form that goes back to the jury room.
Why don't you send back multiple forms?
Honestly, I hadn't thought about it before, sending back multiple forms.
Will you think about it?
I will.
That's terrific. See, these lunches do accomplish something. And this is great. What I've learned in doing this, going around the country, is that it's done in so many different ways. But there's little cross-fertilization between, not only between cities, but between judges in the same courthouse, not knowing what their colleagues do or how they do it. And so all these events like this one are videotaped and put on our website. So if people are really interested on getting new, fresh ideas, they just need to go look. We now have 17 videotapes of these jury improvement lunches, and people always come up with different ideas. So let me ask you this question. Judges, I bet none of you give substantive instructions at the beginning of the case. Am I right? Or do you do it, Judge Lasnik?
I don't do it. I know Judge Peckman does it, and some of my colleagues do, and I'm certainly open to doing it. If you asked what is my biggest weakness as a trial judge after almost 30 years, I don't do jury instructions as well as I do everything else. And so I'm not sometimes ready at the beginning of a trial to know exactly what the instructions I'm going to give at the end are. And so I sometimes need a little more time to settle myself in there. If I was able to get it ready ahead of time, I probably would either give, I always give some instructions at the beginning, but they're just general ones. And I'd like to be able to do it beforehand.
But when I was a young lawyer and was trying to learn how to try lawsuits, judges like you would be teaching and say, the first thing you ought to do when you're hired in a case, before you begin discovery, is write your jury instructions, so you know what you're looking for, so you know what questions are going to be asked at the end. And so it seems that more judges now are being open to giving substantive jury instructions at the beginning rather than the end. And they tell the jury, I might change my mind. I'm going to change my mind. What counts is what I tell you at the end, but I'm telling you this right now. And when you talk to the judges, 90% of them, they say that 98% of what they give at the beginning is what they give at the end. There's some changes made, but it's largely done. And it's a great exercise if you can do it. Judge Fricke, would you be open in a trial? First place, I got to ask all the judges this question. You know what stands in the way of, as experience going around the country, I've been doing this for 3 years now. The biggest problem we have in making changes and innovation is judges taking the attitude, I'm going to do what the lawyers want me to do. I mean, if that's your attitude, we are never going to save trials in this country. Because lawyers are, what's good for one lawyer is bad for the other. It's very difficult to get them to agree on anything that's innovative, like allowing the jury, like preliminary instructions, like allowing the jury to talk about the case. But would you allow the jury in your case to talk about the case when they were all together before final deliberations?
So first, let me say that as a United States magistrate judge, I've been a judge now for about a year. I've had bench trials, but so far no jury trials, and I hope that that changes because I would love to have a jury trial in my court. As far as the jurors talking with each other, all of them in the room at the same time. My concern would be if you had a particular juror with a certain type of expertise, or perhaps an excellent communicator, who is trying to sway the other jurors early on. I could see that as a serious concern. Other than that, I don't really have a concern. I've just seen too many circumstances in, being a lawyer and dealing with, lots of different individuals and groups where the first person who's talking the loudest about whatever it is gets a lot of attention and sways other people's minds early on. And you can talk all you want about being open-minded, but some folks will, not be able to get past it.
Judge Whalen, how about you?
I think in a civil case, yes. Not in a. I'd be more hesitant to do it in a criminal case. And I also wonder if there is a way to instruct the jurors that they can discuss the testimony of witnesses and the evidence without reaching or discussing which way they're leaning or how they would vote.
That is in the instructions you give them. I mean, in Arizona, in the jurisdictions that allow it, they instruct the jury, you're not to decide the case, you're not to take a vote, you're not to go around and say, who are you for? That they should not make up their mind, they should be open, but part of the pedagogical experience is to be able to talk about what you just heard and ask questions.
I think that would be a good idea.
Did that witness say it was on a Friday, or did the witness say it was on a Saturday? I didn't hear that. The kinds of things that people ask when they are listening to the same thing and don't hear perfectly. So let me ask this question to you. Let me talk a little about jury selection to get your ideas on that. You mentioned that when you came, you thought it was kind of a imposition. I mean, you were happy to be called.
Yes.
But you were not exactly happy with the jury selection process?
Yeah, it was a lot of hurry up and wait process. We were
wasted
rushing.
time.
Yeah, wasting time. Yes.
And in all your cases, were the lawyers, Judge Lyons, let me ask you, in federal court, you allow lawyers to participate in voir dire?
Yes, I do, right. And most of the judges do, not all, but most of the judges do. Right.
There is, it's interesting, this is very strange too. The federal judges in this country quit allowing lawyers to participate in jury selection. I don't know when that began, but it's been going on for 20 years or more in federal court. State court judges have always allowed lawyers to ask questions of the potential jurors to see if they can ferret out any of your biases or why you shouldn't serve on the jury. But the federal judges were the ones who kept the lawyers out of that. Now, about 50% of the federal judges, I think, around the country are allowing lawyers to participate. What I'm hearing, unfortunately, from some of these judges is that the lawyers say, no, you do it, Judge. I don't want to do it. They're declining the opportunity to themselves do it. And that's part of the problem we have. The judges say the reason we aren't trying so many cases is the lawyers don't want to do it anymore. And if we don't have lawyers who know how to try cases, then we aren't going to have cases to try. It's like a vicious cycle. So it's a problem. But do you think, those of you where they ask questions, where the lawyers were allowed to ask questions, do you think they succeeded in finding out whether you were kind of leaning one way or the other or not? Were they successful or did they waste your time?
I felt they wasted my time.
What?
Sorry.
Wasted?
Yeah,
You thought they wasted time?
It was wasted time.
I felt they were pretty successful. I think we had a case that was highly technical. And so I think they were trying to go for people who could kind of hang with the details of the case over a long period of time. And, so I don't know.
How about you, Ms. Dwyer? Do you think the lawyers did a good job in identifying people who would not make good jurors because they were likely to be biased to one side or another?
Yes.
They did.
Yeah.
Ms. Chan, how about you?
I think they did a good job. Fair.
And Ms. Burke?
On the case that I actually served on, I think they did a good job, but I've been called for jury duty 4 times.
You've been what?
Called for jury duty 4 times.
And this was the only time you were selected?
Yeah, the 3rd or 4th time, I told them that I'd been there last year when I was in a jury panel, or a jury pool, excuse me. And the judge told me I didn't need to stay because I was still in graduate school and still working full time. So,
all right. Were any of you allowed to ask questions, submit questions in writing to the witnesses?
We were.
You were?
Yes. And I actually thought that was very valuable. I submitted several questions, and so did other jurors. There was one point of frustration where several of us had submitted questions, and the judge only selected one. And so the other jurors, kind of felt a little bit frustrated by that. But, I had a lot of questions.
But you thought it was a useful...
Extremely. I feel it's useful. Keeps
now,
you engaged, too, if you know that you have the ability to ask a question later.
Judge Fricke, since you haven't done it, would you be willing to try that?
Yes, I think that makes a lot of sense. Of course, the judge has to screen in case the question is one that would bring up evidence that really isn't admissible, or there's been a prior motion in limine about some evidence. But the idea that the jurors should be able to ask those questions, I think that's absolutely right.
What the way it's done, this is a practice too that's becoming more and more common in this country. Is every juror is given at the beginning of a witness's testimony a blank piece of paper. And at the end of a witness's testimony, the bailiff comes or the marshal comes and gathers the pieces of paper from every one of the jurors and gives them to the judge. Well, it turns out usually there's only one question, maybe there are 2 questions, the rest are just blank paper. But you don't sign it, and the lawyers don't really know which juror asked the question. And the judge looks at the questions and shows them to the lawyers and says, you got any problem with this? And 90% of the time, the lawyers had no problem. There are a few questions that, cannot be, the rules of evidence prevent the jury from knowing certain things. But otherwise, the lawyers ask the questions. And whenever I've seen it done, lawyers love it. I mean, all of our research indicates that although they're suspicious at first, they like the practice because it tells them whether they're getting through, what they aren't making clear. So, Judge Lasnik, would you allow questions, or do you?
Here, I'm an old codger. I do not ask the jurors if they want to ask questions. I am an active trial judge in the sense that if I'm not understanding what's going on, I'm trying to serve as a questioner for the jurors. If I see they're looking puzzled at something, or so many times witnesses testify using, well, that's a SEPA issue and nobody knows what SEPA is. And I intervene a lot and ask questions, considering that's part of my job. But I don't like the idea of turning the jurors into either advocates or questioners, and even just the process you described of distributing papers for each witness, collecting papers for each witness, going to a sidebar with the attorneys as to what questions they're going to object to or not object to. One says yes, the other says no. Make a record on that. It's already too much time for me. I just want to move things along and keep going. So, they always say, my favorite federal judge joke is, how many federal judges does it take to change a light bulb? And there's 2 answers. One is just one. He holds up the light bulb and the entire world revolves around him. And then the other is change. Who said anything about change? So I'm on the second part of that.
Okay. Judge Whitland, how about you?
I do allow questions in civil cases. I use it as an opportunity for the jurors to stand because frequently when it's time for questions, they've been sitting for a very long time. So I really encourage them to stand and, just sort of move around a bit in the jury box. And I think the lawyers really like the opportunity to get that feedback. I would say maybe 60 to 70% of the time I ask the questions, and it doesn't take that long. We go to sidebar, and on the form, I check whether it was asked or not asked, and if it wasn't asked, I write down a brief reason, and then that gets filed with the court so that there's a record and it's pretty quick. So I enjoy doing that.
But if we're going to do it for civil, why wouldn't we do it for criminal then?
Well, I think the concern might be that, like, why isn't the defendant testifying? Or I don't know. I find that in criminal cases, because there's a loss of liberty at stake. I'm much more I want to more tightly control the proceedings to make sure there's so many constitutional rights that attach in a criminal proceeding that aren't present in a civil proceeding.
I mean, I think that's a fair point. And well, Judge Lasnik, are you so opposed to change that if the lawyers on both sides of the docket came to you and said, we have agreed that the jury should be allowed to ask questions, you would say, not in my court?
Pretty much, yeah.
Fair enough. The instructions, let me talk a little about the instructions themselves. There has been a lot of discussion. I don't know how many instructions. Sometimes instructions take an hour for the judge to read, a long time. But did you have a difficult time understanding the instructions, or were they pretty clear to you? Oh, well.
I felt they were very clear.
Clear. Good. On the process, Ms. Hosea, of deliberation itself, I think, were you the one who said you didn't get much help on how you go about deliberating?
Yes, I think the jury I was on had one of those people who went into the room and immediately announced a position and said, we can just do this. And there hadn't been any guidance against that. So that was why it was kind of necessary to ask that the process be restarted with some process, in fact, in place.
So what did you do? How did you start it?
By protesting that precipitous decision-making and trying to force a decision on the group.
All right.
But you did it all yourselves you didn't
Yes.
ask the judge for guidance?
No.
How did you select the foreman in your jury?
I really don't recall. I don't think it was me, but the way I filled out, in fact, I know it wasn't me, and the way I filled out that form was, in trying to institute a process, I kind of became that, because you had to facilitate a process for it to take place in that kind of an environment.
Did in any of your cases, did the judge select the foreman, or did the jury itself select the foreman? Judge Lasnik, how is it done in your court?
I never even heard of a judge selecting a presiding juror. No, it's always the jury selects that. That's the instruction tells them. The first thing you do is select a presiding juror who will guide you in your deliberations and then sign the verdict when the jury is ready to return it.
Okay. I was just asking this kind of, in your deliberations, can you kind of give me an idea of how soon did you take the first vote? I mean, Ms. Burke, do you remember? Was it right away? I mean, did you just say, let's figure out where everyone stands?
I think we kind of took a temperature of the room. This was about 5 years ago. So as I recall, it was also while we were trying to maybe select a 4-person. So it wasn't necessarily a vote so much as it was an initial discussion of thoughts and feelings.
Ms. Chan, do you recall?
I was not in the process. I'm the alternate juror.
Oh, you need a microphone.
I was not in the process because I was the alternate.
Oh, right.
And they didn't do it either.
You didn't deliver, right?
Yeah, we did. We,
I mean,
we
we-
kind of took a, like she said, the temperature of the room, of what like we did it with the vote
At
at the
very
beginning,
early.
at the very beginning.
Okay. Did one of the frequent criticisms of juries of trials is that the lawyers repeat themselves too much. And did y'all have that problem? Did any of you think it lasted too long? That the trial could
In
have
some
been-
ways, some repetition is good, especially if it's a complex case. Actually, we had a lot of repetition of depositions that were read, and there were so many, and the readers were not always theatrical or portraying the person that they were supposed to be representing, and so that actually was part of the challenge in kind of maintaining focus. Was there were an extremely large number of those that tended to be repetitive.
Anyone else have a problem with?
We ended up also having a lot of telephone ads. It's like
A
it
lot
was
of what?
like from telephone ads, telephone book ads. I'm sorry, telephone book ads from like the 30s to the 70s.
Each year.
And yeah, it was like each year.
Here we go.
That was kind of tended to make me lose focus.
What was your case about?
What was your case about?
It's a mesothelioma.
Mesothelioma. And it was an advertisement for a company that carried asbestos.
So it was the distributor, actually, that was being challenged.
All right.
Those are difficult cases for juries, really, because I know when you talk about reading depositions, that's a lot of these witnesses go back 30, 40, 50 years. And was the plaintiff still alive or passed away? Right.
Passed away.
Those are tough. I had an interesting experience just to talk about this. I had an asbestos case and mesothelioma case in federal court, and the plaintiff's lawyer was one of the biggest jerks I've ever seen, and really rude to me and to witnesses. And he was giving his closing argument in the case, and one of the jurors stood up and said, "Your Honor, would you please tell counsel to stop screaming at us?" Which I just wanted to reach down and hug this person. And I think I said something along the lines of, "You made your point." But interestingly enough, the jury could not reach unanimity, which you need in a civil case in federal court. And I asked both parties, would you accept a non-unanimous verdict? And plaintiff said yes, and the defense said yes because they knew that the jury hated plaintiff's lawyer, but they didn't hate the plaintiff, and they gave him a $10 million verdict on a non-unanimous verdict. So jurors will distinguish between a lawyer they don't like and a case which they're going to decide on the merits. So I think it's an important point.
Yeah, very, very interesting. Judge Lasnik, what can judges or lawyers do to keep trials from disappearing? What
I
important
really
things
think,
can-
because I was a state court judge for 9 years or so before I went to the federal court, and that the bar in this town still likes to try cases. Both civil and criminal. The prosecutor's office, when I was there, would file cases that you're not necessarily going to win because we believed that it was part of pushing the system in the right direction on sexual assault cases, child molestation cases. And so, like many counties would have a 99% conviction rate. King County didn't. because we were taking difficult cases to trial. And I think in the civil bar is comfortable trying cases in both state court and federal court. So and maybe Judge Woodland, you tried a bunch of cases yourself as a lawyer. Do you think that matters, the bar in general, or the culture of a court?
I mean, I agree with you that the culture in Seattle is that lawyers want to try cases, and they're good.
Yeah, and the judges, get plenty of experience, and many of us on the federal bench are former state court trial judges, and so we come with a tradition of trying cases and enjoying it.
Now, if we file a case in your court, when will you give me a definite trial date? The first conference?
You'll get a definite trial date early on, but
how many times will you change it?
I'm not one of these people who believes under no circumstances will we ever change that trial date. That's an area where I do defer to the lawyers. And to me, people have criticized me for that, but when you look at the statistics of filing to actual trial, in my cases, they're not significantly different from judges who never continue the case. So to me, I'll be flexible on that.
So how long does it take from filing a case to trying a case in your court?
I would say between 18 and 24 months for civil.
Have you ever used time limits on trial?
Only for certain lawyers. I shame people. And I will say it right in front of the jury, I will say, we have heard this, counsel, so many times. Don't you think these people here are listening? Don't you think they can remember? And the jurors are going like, yeah, thank you, Judge. So I use shaming more than I use actual, chess clocks or time limits or anything like that.
Judge Woodland, how about you? Do you set time limits?
I have not set time limits, although I do try to move things along, and I'll ask ahead of time the lawyers how much time they think we'll need. And in the trial I just completed, we set out an expectation of when the trial would end and go to the jury, and we all worked to hold to that, and we let the jury know that. So the jury was expecting when their service would be ending as well. And I just think mentally that keeps people on track, and it keeps jurors happier knowing that there's an end in sight.
So how do you explain that line, that red line that's relatively straight in King County and the state courts, where the trials don't seem to be disappearing? They drop, but they're kind of leveled out. What are y'all doing?
Well,
what are you doing differently?
He's only been there for that tiny
little bit. I right. So I don't think I can speak authoritatively on that. I was appointed to the bench this year, but maybe next year I'll have more information on that.
Judge Lazick, do you?
Yeah, I think what I already covered, the culture of the bar. We have a really great bar, both criminal and civil, that is comfortable taking cases to trial. And we have judges, a tradition in the King County Superior Court and other counties too, of having, people who, that's why I became a judge. Not, one of the things that frustrates me so much in federal court is you go to training on how to try employment discrimination cases, and people who are teaching it will tell you that if your case goes to trial, it's a failure on your part. Literally, a failure on your part. And I'm like, no, it's not. Some cases need to go to trial. And that's how the law develops, and that's how we work things with new doctrine and the like. So, but there is a mindset, it's not prevalent very much in our district as much as others, although it's still there, that you have somehow failed if your case makes its way to a jury trial. And I actually have to be back there at 1:30, so I'm going to have to check out.
Yes, and we're going to end right now. So I end a little early because I don't want to impose on anyone's time. It's been fascinating listening to your ideas, and thank you for coming today and for sharing your ideas with us. And let's keep up the good work and keep jury trials alive in this country, because it's a time when everyone says, you turn on TV and you hear about the crisis in democracy in this country, that we have a real constitutional crisis. Well, our democracy's safe as long as they can't take away your liberty or your property or your money without the consent of 12 citizens drawn at random from the community. And that's why, and no matter who's the president, no matter who's the judge, it's the 12 jurors. And that's what our founding fathers believed. And it's as important today in this country as it was in 1791 when they put that in our Bill of Rights. So thank you very much for coming, and have a great weekend.